I will give the floor to Joe. Thank you very much, dear Joe, to be here in this special moment for all of us.
Thank you. It is a great joy for me to be in this conference because Professor Alejandro and we met many years ago with many of the others, some of whom were students at that time, and they are now the stalwarts of this special program in Argentina. It is my privilege to be here to talk to you and to also put in perspective some ideas about Southeast Asia, which is an area in the world that needs attention because it's something like South America. I titled this presentation with some slides that will be played as the loading dose. This is a term taken from the medical dictionaries, and it's relevant today because of the COVID situation. Now, a loading dose is something like a vaccine. Sometimes you have to administer a series of vaccines or what we call boosters. And the way I view this topic, that we have to create sustainability, is something like battling the COVID. And you need to have something that is researched. If you look at the medical profession, they do real laboratory research before they apply anything like a project to liberalize or create multi-structural system. Let me just explain slide one. In part one, I will appraise what UNTREF and Professor Alejandro has done. And part two, I will give you an idea about the complex musical systems in Asia. And part three, I will give you my research, which has been going on for 30 years. And it is on a topic called sonic orders. Now, slide two, briefly, this was the view I had of Professor Alejandro's work when I first met him. So I created this graphic here from information I read about 13 years ago. I think today you have done much more than what I imagined you would. This graphic is what I show all my students, and I've had almost 200 graduate students in the last 3 to 4 years. Many of them are PhDs, you see, and some are very interested in what you have been doing. So I will try to tie these things up. Now, what does this graphic show? This graphic has shown us in Southeast Asia that South America had a great history, and it was two great civilizations actually that merged. Of course, you had your wars and all that, and so did Europe. But you can see the way the history moves in waves is very orderly. I couldn't do a graphic like this for Southeast Asia. And it was from here that this fantastic program drew your energy. You didn't have the privilege of seeing the instruments nor hearing the music. So you had to go into a different dimension. This slide is my view of what Alejandro has done. It is tremendous because you have crossed so many other disciplines, and on the right side you have used media, staging, orchestration to merge all of this together. I tried to do this in Korea.
The stage is filled with a familiar set of melodies. Yet, the performers responsible for this are from 11 different countries, comprising the world's first traditional Asian orchestra.
There are 52 instruments. They are all separate. The composers who have been struggling with doing some concepts know that you need to list down 52 lines, and that will make it the biggest orchestral score in the world. I tried to do this in Singapore. And now I'm trying to do it in Thailand to bring instruments of Southeast Asia together. But I don't think we can reach the depth you have reached. This is the history of Western music. It's 2,000 years of Western music in the same kind of development that you have done in South America for 10,000 years. In the West, they had a lot of wars here, but music and culture progressed in a very orderly manner, right? Very orderly, and it began with clear lines by chants, church, ambrosial chants. And suddenly, where the medieval period starts, a surge of energy takes place. And that is because the Catholic Church had told all the domains in Europe one chant and not so many chants, trying to do what every nation tries to do to identify yourself. Was it good or bad? We don't know. It depends on how you look at Western music history. So from the 12th century to the 6th century, there was this search for something. They wanted to get the tertian chord, the triad, and they were searching for what was missing. It took them so many years, 600 years, before they found this missing comma. And then the new era started. You can see as we go into the Renaissance and go into the 20th century, the lines get very mixed up. Industry begins to support, new instruments are created to support new ideas and so on. So the history of Western music and the history of what you are doing in South America and what we would or may do in Southeast Asia is very different. I'm trying to impress on Asia in particular that we cannot take our benchmarks through the history of the West. We know it is a sophisticated system, but it came from similar sources. So that is the main point of this graphic. The current progress of music in South America is a model which we should look at. That's my point. In this short excerpt, Longquen, it is as sophisticated as Beethoven's Fifth because it's based on one motive. But you bring the forces of your energies through your multidisciplinary expertise to entertain as well as inform people. I'm trying to get Asia to do something like this. It may take a few years. Okay, we go to the next slide, the fluid piano. And I know from talking with One Villa that you all know about Jeff Smith and the instrument he created. He spent his life savings doing it. My wife and I went to London to see him. We went to Brighton. He showed me the piano. And then I took the idea of the piano to China. When I was doing work in Korea, I popped over to China and I showed it to the maker of the biggest piano industry there, Chang Piano. And he was suddenly enthralled. He knew what the piano was all about, but he wanted it flown to China. And that's when the conversation stopped. Indian music could be played because they are ready to perform. The Turkish musicians whom Jeff was with, he played with them, and that's why he constructed this piano. When you create a technology, you need to link it with the theory. And so if you look at the progress of Western music, they did that. And the industry supported instruments as the knowledge expanded. That is, I think, the best thing we can learn from Western music, to taper our industry to that. This next slide shows you the biggest field to laboratory musicology project in ASEAN. And nothing happened after that. These books with the 10 CDs funded to the tune of 330,000 US dollars. It's the biggest ever. The idea behind the project was to find a scientific doorway. In the first two chapters, the technologists worked with us to do something which I wanted to use to discuss the modification or version 2 of the MIDI. Because by the end of 80s and 90s, MIDI seemed to be the root for the music world. And MIDI is the perfection of the Western system without any ability to manipulate it digitally, you see, unless you create computer programs like many of the computer musicians did. Dr. Chu Chai Heng, he's our leading acoustic scientist, whom I coaxed to come on the project, and he has fantastic laboratories. He came on with his team, using the machines, all sophisticated machines, to find out if we could find tonal centers in the musical systems. The musicians came to Singapore for the project. See? So we spent 3 weeks together with the musicians, and his paper, he says that there was a way forward. But unfortunately, ASEAN, who funded it, never acted on it. So I hope someplace else in the world will take this up. We should try to find a way to establish pitch intervals which are logical and scientific, so that the MIDI standard can become version 2. Version 1 is propelling the pop industry, and they are earning a lot of money, so they don't care to develop it. But here, musicologists, especially the ethnomusicologists, they are trying to find a way, and they're finding it in other routes that keep the descriptive method going, not the scientific method. So we need to bring that scientific method back, and then you talk about the description. Because the way the doctors are doing it today for COVID, they don't describe it to you. They do the lab work, and then they publish, and then the people discuss it. And then today they are finding out that, oh, it didn't work. But it's okay, it's scientific. So they go back to the laboratory, and now you're going to get booster shots, you see? So that is the process. So this process is very hard for me to even get UNESCO to understand. You know, so all the ICTM and all these groups, they are groping around, and I think they will fall off the cliff very soon. This next slide is what I'm working on now, and I'm basically using an app which you see in the center, and that app forces my students to describe any music they give me. So not in an essay form, but exactly what they are saying, where the sound is. It's very hard to do even for the professors. This app is being configured, digitized, and protect the audio with the app inside the server. The other things are the methodology. TMAL is the timeline music annotation, which is the library annotation. It's a long history here, involves Indiana University, and probably you know about it. And then the wiki is the idea that the information will be in such a wiki within the server. Messi is the same system being used to analyze transmissions, music transmissions to radio, television, recordings, performances, and so on, which is much easier today because all of this are going into digital formats and digital routes. And below it is the accounting. So you come in with a laptop or whatever technology that can interface, and then you have your routings. So that's the system that is being developed. And also I'm teaching the operations.
We have three of our best teachers with us on the instrument called the mridangam.
This is a laboratory that was actually built at the Singapore Management University. They asked me to teach a course called Music East and West when they were established in the year 2000. So I told them, yes, I would do it for you. And I drew the design, and they actually did it. It cost a lot of money. But this was a laboratory where I could dissect the music and do projects. The story which I narrated to Wanvila was that when I went to look at the grounds, I only saw one pillar, and then they marked out the ground. The pillar right here, any musician will reject it, but I did not, because they were willing to pay for it. So we employed a very simple thing. All right, where will the conductor be? So I said, okay, look, I want to be somewhere here, in the center of the plot. So we said, all right, draw the V shape over the pillar. And we said, put the door there. Put the door. So, and then from there, you recreate the studio. So you have a studio and you have all the facilities here, including a video conferencing room, because I was doing part-time. But my students were full-time in the university, so they could come in and work on their projects. And their projects were all audio-based, and they had to do it timeline. So they created all kinds of timeline. And I have a lot of my students' material, which I will publish on this early stage of the integrated music laboratory. But the lab was a wonderful place. I'm saying we have to work with the music chain in mind. And the music chain is the business operation. 95% of it are the listeners, and only 5% are the professionals. And within that 5%, you have people like all of us in the institutions, people in the performing industries, and people in the technical industry, the services, which include the teachers in the classroom. And everything is based on listening. And who's paying? The people are paying. They buy the tickets, they buy the recordings. The business of music is in trouble now. And I think it should be musicologists who are talking about integration, who should look at the music chain per se. And this idea of the laboratory, today with the digitization capabilities, we can disperse the idea into servers. You don't really need this laboratory that costs over $1 million in Singapore. After I left, they didn't know what to do with it. And today it's just a dance studio. Now, today I use this kind of the software, and this one of my students from China who's doing a thesis on piano playing Chinese repertoire. And what they do is they build their arguments and their descriptions in layers. And she did it in 4 layers, but actually the software can allow you to do it to 6 layers. So this is one modern example of a timeline, descriptive. And all of this can be made into a text, and from there they write their articles or whatever. Okay, now this is the unknown musicologist in Singapore. It's Dr. Ivan Pulanin from London. He came to Singapore to serve as a doctor under UNESCO. He was a film buff, but he also recorded Southeast Asia like Yap Kuns. These are all his recordings from the Pacific, from the South China Sea, from the Straits of Malacca, and so on, right? Ivan Pulanin. So now this is a laboratory on its own, right? These are all his tapes. There are many, many. So film and tape. I will open my system later to all musicologists who want to put it into the timeline system. What I wanted to show you was a whole spreadsheet where I calculate, I assess samples from radio, television, recordings, and concerts on set parameters, and then I index them and show it to you where you stand, something like what the people are doing for the environment. So they show the haze in Singapore, today is good, tomorrow is bad, that kind of thing, you see, or weather. Now I'm doing that for music. This is my graphic to describe Singapore. Now, Western music is the major part of Singapore because we came from a British colony. Chinese music is very rich. Malay music is not too rich, but it reflects Sumatra more than the southern part of Indonesia. Indian music is absolutely rich, and it's always scoring the highest when I take measurements in Singapore. And world music is very mixed here and mostly pop music. So I created 3 models to help curriculum builders for school programs. The construct model, then I create the percentages for the different musical systems here. Then I actually test the environment, and you can see everything is lost. Only the Western music is surviving. And so I will tell curriculum builders, please, you plan the next stage. And my recommendation is like that. You can achieve it on the 3rd graphic. I hope it will be implemented someday.